The second class of to be a Jew. I think we got through the first chapter. We're going through the second chapter, the Halacha, the Jewish way. I talk a lot. I've been talking a lot about this throughout the section on history, but it bears repeating. A Jew lives his life according to halacha. Halacha, it comes from the Hebrew word halach. Halach means to walk, or to go. It's the way you go. That's the name we give to Jewish law, the proper way to go. The halacha is a very dynamic system, contrary to what a lot of people believe. It's dynamic in that it's always changing. When you think of Jewish law, this is it. This is the law. What's in the books, and when you think of people who keep the law as strictly as possible, you think of the most orthodox people. You think they're completely unbending and unchanging. The truth of the matter is, the halacha is very dynamic. It's constantly changing and adapting to new forces, to new situations, to new circumstances. The thing is, although it bends to adapt, you can only bend something so far without breaking it. See, that's the difference. You can change and bend, but you can't break the law. We don't have a situation in Jewish law where we have a Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can come and say, well, we're going to change the Constitution. Actually, in America, the Supreme Court can't change the Constitution. It has to be changed legislatively and through most of the states. All the state legislatures have to approve it. It's a very long, involved process. Well, we don't have a way of changing our Constitution, the Torah, but we do have a way of interpreting it. And although interpretation has to be honest and consistent, although the differences of opinion. Some people say the Talmud is like the mind of God. And in Talmud you have constant dialogue. Well, they'll consider a legal issue and they'll give this side, and then they'll give that side, and they'll go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's like the two. It's like in the mind of God, the issue is wrestling with itself, and sometimes they resolve it, and sometimes they don't resolve it. Sometimes a dispute gets to be such where they say teku. Teku is a famous expression. It means when the Messiah comes, he'll tell you what the difference is. Historically, I think there was once a time when there wasn't any difference in Jewish law, in opinion, about what to do. That we had an unbroken chain of tradition that began. If you look in the book, The Ethics of the Fathers, which is a great book to read. It's a book of just great wisdom. It's often called the Wisdom of the Fathers. Pirkei Avot means that really the chapters of the Fathers is the little translation. It's a book in the Talmud, but you'll find it in most prayer books after the Saturday afternoon service. If all of you should have a copy of the Art Scroll prayer book.
When I saw that the other week, that was really very nice.
Yeah.
Is that the new book we're going to be using?
We use it in the chapel currently. Come in, and we're going to be extending that to the entire sanctuary. But everybody should get a copy of it. We have it in the gift shop. You can buy it in soft cover. Hardcover is better because it lasts longer. You're going to use it a lot. Everything you could possibly think of doing, any home ceremonies, Jewish ceremonies, whatever, it's in there. You want to put up a mezuzah, what blessing you say, it's in there. Yeah, okay. You have a bris, and you make grace after meals with the bris. What special prayers do you add? It's in there. I mean, almost everything you can think of will will be in there also after the in the afternoon service is this book, The Wisdom of the Fathers, the Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot. It's and in the beginning of it, it lists the unbroken chain of the transmission of Halacha from Moses, who got it on Mount Sinai from God, to Joshua, from Joshua to the judges, who were the rulers of the Jewish people in the early ages of Israel, and then to the prophets, and the prophets gave it to the rabbis, and through the rabbis it came down to our day, and it gives the delineation of that unbroken chain. But somewhere along the line there were breaks in the chain, especially in the times of persecutions, as I've said, with the Romans and the Greeks. And so things were lost. And we don't know, for instance, if the proper way to light the Hanukkah candles is 1 the first day and 8 the last day, or 8 the first day and 1 the last day. The Talmud solves the dispute through argumentation, but there was a time when everybody knew what the law was. There wasn't no argument about it. Yeah.
Was that part true in the source where the Byzantines and the Germans destroyed Tiberias and all? Then we had 13 synagogues and all like that,
right.
and a large library. All that went.
Right. Yeah, Tiberias is an interesting story in that Tiberias is a great center of learning. Come in.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's near Yavne, or Yavne is part of it,
Mount
I would
Cosmos.
imagine. And Yavne was the great center that the Romans allowed the Jews to have, the great center of learning. That, the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai will appear to Hadrian, I think it was Emperor Hadrian, in a dream, that he will be victorious, and he blessed him in his dream. And when Hadrian came to Palestine, and he saw Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai come out to greet him, he was really taken by him, because this is the man he saw in his dream. And he granted him 3 wishes, because what he had said in his dream to him came true. So the first 2 wishes were taken up with ordinary things that needed pressing issues and that needed resolving right away. And the third thing he asked is Tein li Yavne v'chachameha, give me Yavne and its scholars. So the rabbis of the Talmud criticize him, some of them do, for not saying, well, please don't destroy the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. He knew that wouldn't happen. He knew if he asked for that, he felt that they would destroy the temple anyway, and he would lose his 3rd wish. So he said, at least give me Yavne, which is a center of learning, because if we don't have a central temple, if we don't have whatever we don't have, if we have a place where we can learn Torah, Jewish life will go on. The Halacha will continue, because it will continue to be transmitted, and that's how Tiberias got to be built up as a great center. But eventually that diminished significantly, because the Jews, it just became intolerable for the Jews to live in Israel.
They went to, from Makor, they passed, they had already ruined Tiberias or Teravia, whatever they call it, and they were going to Babylonia.
Yeah. Okay. The history is not what we have to cover now. We did that for the past few months. Any questions on chapter 2? That's a good way to do it. Yes.
I found my quote in here. I just thought it was kind of interesting. It's second paragraph of the chapter. Also update. Many
New attempts?
made to formulate a coherent and systematic approach to Jewish theology. All such attempts, however, were unsuccessful, for Judaism was never overly concerned with logical doctrine.
Right.
I just thought that was kind of an interesting quote.
Who's it by? Belkin. Okay, Belkin was the head of Yeshiva University when I went there. May he rest in peace. Yeah. That's Jewish theology, not Jewish law. In other words, just to prove logically that God exists, something you really cannot do. I offered all to you before the proofs for the existence of God. and I showed you how they fail logically, but also they fail logically in the same place where the proofs for the non-existence of God would fail logically. But these proofs are nevertheless compelling, like there must have been a beginning. There's order and purpose to the world. Order implies purpose, and the purpose implies that there be an agent in the world who wanted it, who created it. I mean, there's a lot of proof that are really compelling. They're just not logically impossible to say otherwise. So about theology, there's no logic, but about law, it's all logic. And let me give you once again draw for you the structure of Jewish law as I outlined this a few months ago. Jewish law begins with what?
Talmud.
Torah.
Torah, yeah.
See, I'll do it this way.
Yeah, I wrote this one already.
And it's really important to understand these distinctions. Torah. We have two Torahs.
Written and oral.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I wrote so far.
Why did God do that? Why did God just write it all down? Why did he give part of it written to Moses and the rest of it he just told him? And you remember this and you teach it and let this be an oral tradition, an oral teaching.
So it could change with the time?
Not everybody could, obviously, most Jewish people could read, but not everybody can read. So that would give...
Well, this became, though, reading became...
Thank you.
Well, yeah, no, but still.
Right. Okay, but the Torah was read publicly at periodic times before the people, so everyone would know the law, written law. But the oral law was never read publicly. That was just all it was discussed at classes and stuff. You had to go and learn. I think this is a compelling system, really, where you have the written law that everybody sees, and you have the oral law, which is the interpretation of it, which grows. God didn't want to restrict it. If he would write it down, it would be restricted. He wanted it to grow. That's one of the beautiful things about Judaism. That's why it's dynamic. Now, the oral, what was the written Torah given? Oh, Moses was about 1300 BCE, some say 1250.
I've got 1250.
Yeah, something 1200, something around there. Okay? Now, we have the oral law. We have the first writing down of the oral law, which is the Mishnah. Good notes. Mishnah. Spelled with an H. All right.
Yeah.
Mishnah was finally written down around the year 200. Why do you think that happened, the year 200? Why do you think the oral law was finally written down in some form around the year 200? Well, what was happening in the Jewish world at that time?
Well, the temple was destroyed in 70.
70, right? Yeah. What happened about?
Jews got dispersed all over.
Yeah. What happened? What happened just before this? About 150, 140 something. Bar Kokhba rebellion, the last final rebellion of the Jews against the Romans, was crushed, and the Romans got incensed. And they razed the city of Jerusalem and built it into a pagan capital, renamed it Alina Capitolina, something like that. And then they began to disperse the Jews, and I wanted them out of the land. Well, with persecutions and not being able to teach Torah, and when you're dispersed all over, away from the great centers of learning, what happens to what you've learned? You begin to forget it. They didn't want it to be forgotten. They wrote it down. It was a sin to write it down. because they lost that oral tradition.
Split it.
But an oral tradition arose on the Mishnah, and that eventually was written down, and that is called
Gemara.
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 Yeah. And that was redacted,
O-R-A.
fancy word for edited, written down for the same reasons, 600 in various stages through about 900. And Mishnah and Gemara together are called Talmud.
Talmud.
Then you have a whole tradition that's arisen on the Gemara and the Mishnah on how to interpret it. First, you have people like the Savo Ra'im. You have their books. They were the editors, the late editors of the Talmud. Then you have the Rishonim. Rishon is a Hebrew word. It means first. These are the first commentaries on the Talmud. You have Rishonim include wonderful, wonderful commentators like Rashi and the Rashbam and other famous people. Maybe Maimonides can be put into that text, and Nachmanides, and Maimonides said, there's no real logic into the way it's been written down to date. There's some logic, but it didn't really conform to logic. So what happened was, when the Gemara talks about the Mishnah is divided into 6 sections. Agricultural laws, certain religious laws, special laws about women, which mean matters of divorce and marriage and other things like that. And then there was holidays. They had 6 sections. But the Gemara, discussing the Mishnah in each of those 6 sections, would bring things in from, if they were talking about a matter of logic, they would, and someone would question a principle that someone brought in, he would bring in how that principle is used in other areas of Jewish law. So while they're talking about whether this divorce writ was properly done, they'll bring in laws about whether such and such is kosher. There's nothing to do with it. But if you want to find out about that thing being kosher, you have to look in the laws of divorce. And which means, if you really wanted to know what the law was, you had to go to a rabbi who studied so much that he had in his mind where to find everything. Right? It was very hard.
That's you.
Well, I don't know. Then what they did was, when Maimonides did, he brought down a new codification called the Mishnah Torah of these laws. He just tried a very logical form, and then he did a lot of other things too. He was a great philosopher and thinker. And he took the Mishnah and Torah. Mishnah and Torah. It was the Mishnah on the Torah. And he made a more logical system. And then there was someone else who did that. Yosef Cairo. Wrote something that really everybody is familiar with today in the Jewish world, called the Shulchan Aruch. Well, I'll put it in the A. Depends on how you Shulchan Aruch, which is really a real codification. Maimonides did a very good job of codification. This is a lot more detailed codification of Jewish law. It's definitive. However, Joseph Cairo was from the Sephardic world, not the Ashkenazic European world. You're talking Maimonides, 14th century, I think. I'm talking Cairo around 15th century. But here you're talking about the Sephardic community. Well, by this time already there were Jews in Europe, in Germany, in France, and they were the Ashkenazic Jews, and they had already slightly different traditions. Like you don't eat rice on Passover. Oh, but the Sephardim had no trouble with eating rice on Passover. All right. So what were the different? There was a man called the Ramah. I won't write it down for you. Rabbi Moses of Cerceles, who just took the Shulchan Aruch and made a new edition and put in brackets after each law if there was a difference in the Ashkenazic tradition and what they would follow. So he was like the known leader of the Ashkenazic world. So actually, if you get a copy of the Shulchan Aruch today, you'll see inside, after each law, if that's not after each law, but after many laws, you see brackets, and then you'll see, but the Ashkenazim do such and such. And it would present the difference of opinion. But if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, you see a little thing on the top, and then commentaries all over again, just like you have in the Talmud. And then there are books and books and books written on that. And then the later commentaries are called Acharonim. Acharon means the end, the ones the last ones, the latter commentaries.
That was presumptuous.
Well, we are still in the Acharonim stage. Yeah.
When was that written?
No, it's not a book. It's all the commentaries that come probably after the 15th century. Of course, the Jewish world is assumed. Is assumption there that the world was created for 6,000 years. So this is the year 57, 54. So in 200 and help me out, 46 years or so, 45 years or so, the world existence as we know it will cease to exist. So they figure for another 200 or so more years, the Achronim could still be in that period, right?
Right.
Still put them in there. Why did I bring you all this? Why do I emphasize it again and again and again? You know, this is probably from 900.
Some of us weren't here the first time.
I think it goes into the discussion here.
Sorry.
And I think the reason is
To show us that it's dynamic, that it didn't stop with the
it
Torah.
continues to grow. Now there's a separation in law that I must tell you about. That's fundamental also. All this, as I told you, is the interpretation of Torah. But there is such a thing as laws that are not based on the Torah, that we follow. Rabbinic laws. He mentions that in chapter, right? Rabbinic laws. Why would the rabbis feel it necessary to institute laws that are not written in the Torah? Well, there may be circumstances that really warranted it. Certain laws they instituted in order to allow us to practice the Torah, to help us practice the Torah. For instance, they would say you're not supposed to touch a pencil on Shabbos. Well, if you don't touch a pencil, you don't write. It helps you get there, right? Right? Some say that's a biblical law, but I think it's more in the rabbinic category. Then there were laws that they just made decrees. Like that they felt it was time that human beings should live in this manner. Like, a man should only have one wife. That's a general rule throughout the Torah and the Talmud in practice, but it wasn't a rule in law. There were violations of that rule. Yeah, you saw it. Abraham had two wives, right? He had Sarah and Hagar. Why did he have Hagar for a wife? Sarah was barren, but who told Abraham to marry Hagar? Sarah. He wasn't interested in Hagar. All right, Isaac had Rebecca, one. Jacob. Who did Jacob want to marry? Rachel. He woke up in the morning, and who was in his bed was Leah. Right? So it's he only wanted one wife. I mean, the principle is there.
They sure gave in, or Well, the books are full.
Actually, if you take a look at one of the remarkable things about Father Jacob is that he had no control over his sex life. You see that there was a story with the mandrakes, that Leah's children found some mandrakes, which is supposed to be an aphrodisiac, and Rachel said, "Please give it to me. You know, I need to get pregnant because I don't have children." And they were controlling who he's going to sleep with, because they all each had a handmaiden that they gave to him as well, like Hagar. So
Why did Solomon need 1,000?
Solomon had 1,000 wives. Do you think that Solomon serviced 1,000 wives?
No.
He was a bright man, but he wasn't Superman. Solomon had 1,000 wives. They were forms of political alliances. In those days, each city was considered a country of its own. But if you married the daughter of a king of each city, right? You're now going to have an alliance with them, and they're not going to attack you, and and politically things are going to go well. So that's what he did. He married. He had one wife that he really loved, and Bathsheba, and he had, you can follow the stories there. It was a day, but anyway.
So those 1,000 wives were free to marry somebody else after they married Solomon?
No.
No, they got stuck.
Oh no, they were married.
They were in trouble.
They were really married.
Nothing.
They were really married. They were really married.
Oh, they were lonely.
Just had to be the
Yeah, I was
man.
about to say.
So they were lonely then?
Yeah, I guess he visited them infrequently. I would imagine. I really can't tell you that, but the purpose of the marriages were not
He'd be
marriage;
dead.
was a political alliance. Anyway, if you look through the rest of the,
They were in better shape.
if you look through the Torah, all the stories where they have more than one wife, you see generally, one wife was what was intended. If you look through the Talmud, all the rabbis were listed in their families, etc., etc. It's almost impossible to find an instance in the Talmud where a rabbi had more than one wife. If you look in the book of Proverbs, it talks about a woman of valor who could find. Right? Eshet Chayil means really a wife. A wife of valor who could find. And so it was the pursuit. It was, and written by King Solomon actually. It was the pursuit for a good wife, not wives. Okay. But it's important to understand what the distinction is between a Torah law and a rabbinic law. For instance, the Torah says, well, we learn from the Torah logically, and that's considered like the Torah says. If we can learn out logically for, what the Torah says. For instance, the Torah says 3 times you shouldn't cook a goat in the milk of its mother. So logically we learn, according to the Torah, you're not allowed to eat meat and milk, cook meat and milk, or derive any benefit from meat and milk, like cooking cheeseburgers and selling them. So the question now becomes, after you eat meat, how long do you have to wait before you eat milk?
30 minutes.
6 hours.
6 hours.
8 hours?
Well, I
Well,
mean,
it depends on who you are.
But your
Milk to
digestion,
meat is shorter than meat to milk.
but your
I think.
digestive
yeah, so
system takes its
what's the
time.
problem? The problem is that if you eat, meat sticks between your teeth, and the fatty acids go on the palate of your mouth. And even brushing your teeth won't get rid of the fatty acids on the palate of your mouth. They may get rid of what's in between. You'll know about that, right?
Yeah.
She's a dental hygienist.
Hygienist.
Yes,
Say floss will take care of that.
we'll take care of the well,
No.
fatty acids. It won't.
No.
We'll take care of the
Meat.
meat. Yeah.
Why does chicken fall and turkey fall into the?
Perfect example. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me just do one thing at a
And
time.
fish. Fish is not considered.
No. So what happens is they decide that they learn logically that the real problem with the mixture of meat and milk is the taste. So you have to arrive at a situation where you won't have a taste of meat and milk in your mouth. So if you just had milk, if you rinse your mouth out, probably you'll get rid of the taste. And or if you wait a half hour and eat a piece of bread or something, you get rid of the taste, you'll eat
Sorry.
meat. Right? So But with meat, it's after you eat meat, it's different because you have to wait for the fatty acids to dissolve and all. So some communities say you should wait 6 hours. And even if there is still meat between your teeth, it'll lost all its taste after 6 hours reacting with the saliva. Right? That's those are the most of the Eastern Europeans wait 6 hours. The German Jews, on the other hand, wait 3 hours. Feel it's enough. Now the Dutch Jews, I believe, wait 1 hour. Well, these are all examples of the rabbis trying to decide what really takes.
So what did they come up with as far as the
What takes
general rule?
precedence? Yeah, it's really rabbinic law. So what? How is this important? Well, let's say one law contradicts another, and you're in a situation where you have to figure out what to do. This is my famous example that I had when I was a rabbinical student. I was a cantor in this particular synagogue, and the rabbi and his wife invited me over to dinner one night. I assumed it was going to be a fleishik dinner, and I had I don't know, I ate some meat about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was hungry. So I had a bite before I came over there. I get there, it's dairy. Right? So she would be very upset and insulted, and I would hurt her feelings after she cooked all day to have us over for dinner if I did not eat. And I usually wait 6 hours because my family's from Eastern Europe. So I decided that I would only wait 3 hours then, and after 3 hours, I would eat, which I did. I would rinse out my mouth and brush my teeth or whatever I could to the best of my ability, and I shouldn't. That not insulting her was probably more important. Particular instance was that the meat that I had was chicken. Now, what's going on here? It says you shouldn't cook a goat in the milk of its mother, right? Well, you shouldn't cook a chicken in the milk of its mother. And the chicken doesn't have milk, right? Actually, according to the Torah, chicken is parv, like fish, and you can eat chicken with milk. The rabbis then decreed that since chicken really has properties of meat, it's really meat, like beef to a great extent, or some other fowl is even more like that. If you take a look at a goose, you ever had a goose?
Yes.
It's like veal. It's almost indistinguishable from veal. And it has blood, it has fat, it has cholesterol.
They didn't know that.
You know, it's got all that stuff in it, right? So, if it's really so much like meat, the rabbi said people are going to get confused. So they decreed that all fowl will be in the category of meat, but that's a rabbinic decree. It's not Torah law. So I first of all, I had chicken at 4 o'clock, and here it is at 7 o'clock. I didn't want to insult her, but you're allowed to have chicken anyway with milk according to the Torah. So that added into my equation. So there will be defined distinctions in law, and it's important to understand what's the difference between a rabbinic law and a Torah law. Okay.
So say you decide right now to eat chicken with Swiss cheese,
No, it's not allowed.
but according to the Torah, it's
Torah,
allowed.
that's right. But
So-
according to the rabbis, they decree that it shouldn't be done because it will cause confusion among the Jewish people.
Okay,
So we're obligated to observe the rabbinic laws, all of them.
Well, you make matzo balls.
But when there's a conflict, or when there's something called shat hat-chak, when there's an emergency situation, then you can have a fallback. Okay, you fall back to Torah law. But l'chatchila, to begin with, you don't violate a rabbinic decree. Okay.
But what about rabbinic laws? I'm sure there are different rabbinic laws as far as one rabbi can interpret the law this way, another will interpret the law another way.
Absolutely.
So what
Absolutely.
happens there?
Absolutely. But there's a hierarchy of acceptance, which is very difficult to understand. However, it's important to understand that if Maimonides and Yosef Cairo said something, it's more important than Rabbi Kunis making a new interpretation against what they said. If I'm going to challenge their interpretation of something, it's not going to be easy for me to do it. So you have certain established authorities, etc. So reinterpretations can come, but they don't come easily or frivolously. And
Does it happen as a group, like it would take a large number of rabbis to agree on something, or
if we could
reconvene
reconvene a Sanhedrin, a Jewish Supreme Court or something, to decide all the challenges of laws in fact, there was an attempt to do that. They wanted to take, I think in the 50s, Rabbi Unterman, who was the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Soloveitchik was the head of the Yeshiva University, and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein on the Lower East Side, were the three renowned Torah authorities in the world, unchallenged, and get them together, constitute a rabbinical court, and they either will add other rabbis or whatever, and they will constitute a court to solve the major problems that are confronting Jewish life today. And there are major problems in Halacha, Jewish law. However, they couldn't agree to meet with each other. And there were, I don't know if we call problems of ego or whatever. It was an attempt. It didn't succeed.
Did they not want to change it?
There were
I mean,
political.
that's
There were
why-
political problems of them meeting with each other. That's what it came down to.
Everyone wanted to
And
be
it's
back out.
embarrassing because when you see certain rabbinical authorities, and we have this with the chief rabbin in Israel sometimes, making decisions based upon politics rather than Jewish law, it turns people off and it becomes distasteful. But I don't want to get into that area. We don't have to go that far with it.
It's not that dynamic.
My intention here was to give you an example, an idea, an understanding of the way Jewish law works, and that there's a difference between Torah law and rabbinic law. But it's still binding. They're both binding. For instance, the whole laws of Hanukkah are rabbinic laws. The Hanukkah story happened after the Bible was already put together, was canonized. It was like 150 something BCE. So there was no possibility of making it a Torah law because the Torah was completed already. Okay. Reasons for the commandments. Chapter 3.
Surrounding me here.
What's the reason that we observe these commandments? The major reason is that if we believe that there's a God who cares about us and loves us and gave us the Torah to live our way of life, that we follow these commandments because we trust that God had our best interests in mind. That's the reason. Each commandment may have other specific reasons. We've talked a lot about laws of eating, about kashrut. There are specific reasons why you might think there are certain reasons why certain commandments are instituted. But it's very dangerous to say, unless the Torah tells you this is the reason. Why? If you're going to tell me that the reason for being kosher is because of health reasons, it's not healthy to eat milk, and pork can be unhealthy if you have trichinosis, and you're going to give me a whole list of things like that. Well, what if it's proven that some non-kosher things, like certain seafood, are very healthy and contain iodine and all kinds of nutrients that you need, and maybe you should eat them because now you can show that they're healthy, and the Torah didn't know that. So the whole Torah system falls apart because of the reasons you gave it, but the Torah didn't give it that reason. What's the reason the Torah gives us being kosher? So we should be a holy people. Didn't tell us that the reason is for health reasons. We can think that possibly this is the reason for it, But we shouldn't summarily assign reasons for things, unless the Torah gives it. We could give insights, perhaps. We could say that being kosher teaches us an ethical sensitivity. We are what we eat. If we must kill to eat, we must do it in a humane way possible. Maybe ideally we should be vegetarians. We don't mix meat and milk. Meat is the death of the animal. Milk is what nurtures and sustains and gives life to the animal. It's an unnatural mixture. You can come up with all these things. But it's not the reason for it. It may give you more meaning in your observance of it. So you have to be very careful when you assign reasons for commandments. Having said that, any questions on chapter 3, on the reasons for the commandment? No? Know that somebody who lives a Jewish life, he talks about Jewish law being like a dynamic puzzle, panoramic puzzle. That I know people who love to do puzzles. They have these ones with 400 or 500 parts. And with a lot of spaces without color in it, all the same color. It really gets really hard and it drives you crazy. You can't find a piece that fits. You can't really see where it's going sometimes until you get it all in. Now you see. Same thing with the Jew living a Jewish life. You really can't see how all the pieces fit together. How being kosher, how observing the Sabbath, how coming to synagogue, how observing all the holidays and taking off from work, and maybe even finding a way to live near the synagogue so you don't have to ride on the Sabbath to the synagogue. How all this comes together and creates a lifestyle that makes your life different all of a sudden. You realize that things have changed. And how when you walk into a Jewish home, it feels different. You put the mezuzahs on the door, you make it kosher, this is a home where you have Jewish books around, where you sit at your dining room table and you make kiddush and Friday nights and you bless God and maybe sing Zmirot and have discussions and laugh and sing. When you walk into that dining room, it feels different than the other rooms of the house. When you walk into your house, it feels different than outside the house. It makes it a holy place. And in Judaism, there's a concept where he talked about a concept of sanctity of place. One of the things that a mystic will tell you that if you want to have a mystical experience, one of the things that's essential is to go to the right place. It's possible to have it anywhere, but certain places have more power to it. So if you want to pray, you come to shul. It's a little more powerful than praying in a garden maybe, or outside, or maybe praying in a garden may be special too in its own way. Or the place that you make, the holiness that you make in your home, that becomes special, unique, and then you could tangibly feel it if you really try to. When you walk through that door of your house, across the pathway where that mezuzah stands, and you walk into the home that you've made an effort to make a Jewish home, you can tangibly feel that there's a difference. Just the space. 2 steps here, 2 steps there. It's different. Sanctity of space, place. There's also a sanctity of time, which is the unique contribution that Judaism made to the world. That we sanctify time. It's unbelievable. In the Jewish calendar, no matter when or where you are, no matter when in the year or where you are, there's always something you're looking forward to. Your mind is working on something else. There's the next Shabbos coming. And that Shabbos has a certain theme to it because of the Torah portion of that week. And then soon there's going to be a holiday. In a couple of weeks there's going to be Tu B'Shvat. It's the New Year of Trees. And you start thinking about that. and it's because it reorients you. And then Tu B'Shvat's coming. Well, Purim's a month, 4 weeks later, and once Purim comes, you got to get yourself mindsets going because Passover is only 4 weeks after that. But the point is that you're always attuned to time, focused on time. The sun's coming down. I better daven mincha because I have to get it in. I have to pray 3 times a day. Or sun's coming down. I better light the candles because Shabbos is coming, and Shabbos is going to be different. You're always oriented. It's time, as opposed to the pathetic picture of people who live in our society, where one day is absolutely not different from the next. And I think that's incredible. And once you put the puzzle together and you live in the time and the spaces, that holy spaces that you create, the holy spaces and holy times, you see that your life is fundamentally different. And that's the ultimate reason for the commandments. Specific reasons for all the commandments and practices we're going to get to when we get to all the different things that we'll talk about. I'm going to shoot to part 2, chapter 4. We did a lot today. But I really want you to come up with more questions. I don't know how. You should have finished part 2 for next time we meet, by the way. Okay, we're not meeting next week for everybody. We're meeting in 2 weeks. Next week I have to be at B'nai Torah for a youth program. I just can't be 2 places together. It's a skill I haven't learned yet. This is a great chapter. Kindness, a means to an end. The first words of any introduction to Jewish daily life must speak of kindness, chesed, because we believe that Jewish religious faith and ritual observance aim above all to achieve perfection of the human relationship and to create a better society. Chesed is the abiding principle of a Jew. What does chesed really mean? All right, it means kindness. What else does it mean? When you feel kind to someone, you do good deeds of chesed, of kind, right? Help them out. It also denotes a certain kind of love, a very special kind of love. Compassionate love and passionate. One of the unique characteristics of the Jewish people, the Talmud tells us, is that the Jews have really a heightened sense of chesed, of kindness towards their fellow man. It's amazing. We haven't become bitter. And the whole world wants to destroy us, so why should we be kind to them? Jews will be the first ones out there protesting and working for any of the downtrodden of the world. Wherever they be. It's how we operate. And that should, beyond all the technicalities of the law, that should be the abiding principle. And when law comes in conflict with chesed, we do everything we can to bend and stretch the law so that chesed will win out in the end. And you'll see that throughout. That's why I chose the example I did about having dinner at someone's home. It was a light example. I mean, I wasn't going to destroy her life by not eating dinner that night. But it was a matter of decency and courtesy. And it's most amazing. You get someone like Rav Moshe Feinstein, may he rest in peace, who was the renowned posek, the renowned arbiter of Jewish law in the world while he lived. He died about 5 or 6 years ago. That maybe 7. That if anybody had an important question in Jewish law, he would take it up. Even people that he didn't particularly associate with, like Hasidim, would come to him to make a judgment. He would take cases no one else would deal with. The case in Judaism about a bastard Bastard's in Hebrew it's called a mamzer. Mamzer is a very serious thing. Mamzer is someone who was born to illicit sexual liaison. Mamzer could be a child that comes from incest. A mamzer could be a child that comes from a woman who's married, which is the more common case. The child of the father is not her husband. Right? That's an unmarried woman having a child is not considered a mamzer. Why? We'll get to that when we discuss the sexual relationships, but that is not a forbidden sexual relationship. It's not forbidden between a man and woman to have sex. It's just forbidden for a married woman to have sex with someone else other than a husband. That's what's forbidden. You see? Or brother and sister to have sex. That's forbidden. Or something of that sort. There are other forbidden sexual relationships. I don't want to get into that now.
Where does right to life come in?
Huh?
Where does right to life come in?
Well, I can only talk about one thing at a time.
That's a whole day in itself.
So you have a situation. This is a typical situation. A woman and man get divorced, but only civilly. They don't get a Jewish divorce. So according to Judaism, they're still married because they were married by a rabbi before God. And if they don't get a Jewish divorce, a get, they're still considered married. The Torah doesn't understand or relate to the fact that they went to the city hall and the lawyers got them a piece of paper which said that they were not married anymore. The Torah doesn't relate to that. There's a specific procedure of getting a Jewish divorce.
Legally, do you have to have two divorces? Legally, or does the Jewish
No, Jewish law, just Jewish law. So in Jewish law, you need a Jewish divorce in order to be considered divorced. Well, what if this woman who gets a Jewish divorce, a civil divorce from a husband, and not a Jewish divorce, and a husband goes off and lives in Europe somewhere, and you don't see him for 10 years. 5 years later, she has a child with somebody else. Is this child a mamzer? Certainly. I mean, it's not. Her husband's not a husband's child. Well, you bring this case to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who doesn't. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, and there's no one who has the kind of authority to do the kinds of things that he did. But since he did enough of them, he gave direction to a lot of us on how to do it. Rabbi Feinstein will come in almost every case, will find a way out to take this child out of illegitimacy. Because if the child is illegitimate, they can't marry another Jew. Mom's is not allowed to marry a Jew. Can marry no. They're Jewish, but they can't marry a Jew. Can marry a Gentile, someone who's not Jewish, and then that child could then go through a conversion.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Right.
Go through conversion.
But
Think
they
of all the questions you're blaming the child for.
right. So you could say that the reason the Torah gave us this law was to show the parents who before they enter into the sexual relationship, the real terrible, tragic consequences that could result of this. Or if this woman had lived with her husband before, as she was having an illicit affair, so you don't know really who the child was from. You say he's a doubtful mamzer. Maybe it's okay. But in the case where a woman went where a woman's husband 10 years in Europe, and she had a child right in the middle of that, what do you do? So along comes Rabbi Feinstein. Well, maybe we'll invalidate the original marriage. Find a way to invalidate the original. Let's check to see who the witnesses were. Maybe the witnesses weren't proper witnesses. They have to be fully Shomer Shabbos, males who weren't related to each other or to the bride and groom. Maybe the rabbi didn't follow the correct procedures. Find a way maybe to invalidate. We'll go through all the little details. And if you could find some little detail that wasn't done properly, they were never married in the first place, so the child's not illegitimate. To find a way.
Unless they were children from the first marriage. Then you got another problem with that one. But
Doesn't matter if they were children.
that's true.
the marriage wasn't just she had children out of wedlock, so she wasn't married. You had a famous case in Israel. I'll probably end with this. Famous case of Israel. I don't know if you remember. Twin girls.
The what?
Twin girls. It was about 15 years ago or so. Maybe longer. Maybe 20, 25 years ago. Situation, as I remember it, was where a man and a woman got married. He was converted. They got married. He subsequently ran away, and she married someone else and had twin girls. These twin girls grew up, and they wanted to get married. They fell in love. Well, go to get married, and they say, well, you can't get married because each of you are in the category of mamzer, because your mother was legally married to the first husband. She married a second husband. And so you're illegitimate, you can't marry. This happened in Israel. So they brought the case before Rav Goren, who was the chief rabbi of Israel. He wrote up a case. It was over 200 pages of sources proving this. He was shot down all over the world, but anybody who shot him down never read it. I can tell you that much. He came up with a ruling. What did he do? He got witnesses to testify that this man was seen going into a church, the original husband, after the conversion, shortly after the conversion. Which means that his conversion was never really sincere. Which means that he never really converted. Which means that if he never converted, it wasn't a valid marriage, because Judaism doesn't recognize a marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew. So if they were never really married, she wasn't a married woman when she married her second husband. So that the children are not legitimate and they can marry. Do you see what's happening here? It's not a method to try to find loopholes. It's a method to try to be compassionate, to exercise chesed. You have a situation, a child, not their fault. They want to get married. They didn't do anything. You try to bend the law so far, bend it to the limits if you can, in order to exercise chesed. And so you could show compassion. And so when people will tell me that the ultra orthodox are so strict and unbending and unruling, they really don't know how they work to try to bend and stretch the laws. Cases of aguna in Israel. Terrible, terrible situations where a man and woman are married. He goes off to war and dies. Nobody knows where he is. She can't get married again. There's no proof of his death.
I have to have the body.
No, but some proof. I saw he was shot. Something else. Something has to be, right? Something. The rabbis will bend the law. Normally, in cases you need of an aguna, which is a abandoned woman, you need to have in most cases, according to Jewish court, two males have to testify. Well, you don't like women to testify because you don't want to subject a woman to the rigors of cross-examination, which may be embarrassing to her. But in this case, hey, you need it. So you will have her testify. Well, what about if only one person saw? You only need two. We'll take the test. What if it's not even Jewish person? We'll take their testimony. Any shred of evidence that they can come up with, and it's very important to allow this woman to marry, to find a way. Chesed, yes.
Well, in the book, The Source,
Yeah.
is it true, or can it apply somewhere today, that this bastard, if he stole something that worth, say, 10 drachmas, say $10, and they put him in jail,
Yeah.
and that if he married
Not in jail. He becomes a slave.
slave, Well,
Or
I'm
just
putting-
a slave. Slave is it goes into a different category of a slave.
And the slave
Slave is allowed to marry, but
marries, so the children
But he doesn't
would be
marry-
clean. But doesn't the
he
chil-
marries a non-Jew. You see, that's the difference there. So moms
the
is allowed to
children
marry.
would be
but a
clean,
lot- moms
they
is-
wouldn't still.
Moms is allowed to marry a non-Jew. So it's a.
Not by a rabbi. Well, a rabbi would do it. The rabbi can't do a wedding for moms, basically.
I don't know. Maybe. I've never had that case. I've really never. It's a good, I have to ask that question. I have to ask that question. What do you do
What was the question?
if a mamzer comes to you, and they can't get married because they're a mamzer, but they met in someone who wasn't Jewish and they want to get married? Can I do the ceremony? It's a good question. It's a good question. I'm going to ask that question. I mean, I can see it's a serious problem since Judaism recognizes the marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew. What kind of marriage is it going to be? So, but it's a very interesting question. I have to see what I can do with it.
Oh, it won't-
All right. My point today is I want you to give you an introduction to the modus vivendi of Jewish law, how it works, and what are the abiding principles. We're going to go through pretty rapidly, probably part 2. Especially laws of kindness. This chapter 5 Sabbath will take us a long time. I'm sure chapter 5 will take 2 or 3 weeks. Yes.
If you get a divorce before conversion, do you have to get a divorce again?
No. If how many? Even if you're still married, if someone is not Jewish is married, and then they come before conversion, Jewish court and convert, it's like they're reborn again. There's no legal attachments in Jewish law to anything that came before.
What's the technicality of a theologian?
Yeah,
What is a theologian technically?
a theologian is just someone who thinks and writes about God.
The reason I said was in this book, this boy who is a bastard,
Yeah.
and he only wants his girl, and she's Jewish, and of course she says no, and he disappears, and later he turns up as a great theologian.
See,
What is he? Still a
Theologian.
bastard.
yeah.